All right, so this talk is about Tigray internet freedom, and the idea that places around the world that house oppressed peoples should be making an argument and should be collectively moving forward together under the banner of internet is a human right, access to internet is a human right. And we all take this for granted, but we will now show you the reality of what it looks like when you live in a world where internet is not considered a human right. So, the longest internet shutdown in history just got done. Actually, it's just now getting done. It's not really actually over. But it happened in northern Ethiopia, in Tigray. Tigray is a very old, very proud community in northern Ethiopia. It's about 22,000 square miles. And it is the northernmost region of the country of Ethiopia. I could tell you everything you need to know about it, but I'm just going to let this video do that. Sound? Yo, you got sound? Of course.
You gotta change your sound settings.
Oh my god. Alright, let's not.
Yes, man.
Classic. All right, let's pretend like that didn't happen. All right, so when a central authority has the ability to deny millions their right to the global stage, that authority is now free to abandon all humanity. I think that we like to pretend like human rights is something that just exists and that people are going to try their hardest to uphold, but it's actually the systems of checks and balances that flag human rights abuses that keep these types of systems in check. I'll just let this do its thing. Bruh.
In Ethiopia, where a 2-week warning that a full-scale humanitarian crisis is unfolding in Ethiopia, where a 2-week conflict in Tigray is threatening to descend into civil war.
Let's now shift focus to our other big story of the hour. An airstrike in a busy marketplace killed 43 and wounded several people in Ethiopia's war-torn Tigray.
The conflict in November 2020, authorities have weaponized internet and telecommunication shutdowns to control information, censor populations, and cover up atrocities, including mass killings and sexual violence against women and girls. The blackout is endangering lives, fueling violence, and exacerbating the humanitarian crisis. The world should know what's happening in Tigray.
The American frustration over the Tigray war is now growing days after the United States announced financial and visa restrictions on Ethiopian and Eritrean officials.
Our Africa correspondent Leila Nathu's report contains images that some will find very disturbing.
Out of their respect for the media, I am doing a disservice to my people that I'm even talking to a person who is justifying the genocide and the killing of the Tigray people.
Of the Tigrayan people, because there is no proof of genocide, of ethnic cleansing. Like she said, there may be some atrocities because of in war, when there's things are going on, things may happen. But we can investigate that. That's not an issue. We can look into that. But when you have a fishing expedition, when somebody's just actively looking to find a problem so they can come attack you, we're not going to send you in.
So
let's do it the right way.
You just heard a couple people in this video, and they are essentially saying there's no evidence of genocide in Tigray. There's no evidence of human atrocities. There's no evidence of weaponized rape. There's no evidence of mass killings, mass graves. That is literally genocide denial, and it's kept in place by the fact that there was no ability for Tigrayans to tell anyone about what was happening. There was no ability for someone to take a photo and upload it. And this was a purposeful campaign kept in place and learned from watching Syria itself shut down the internet a few years ago, and they learned that they could do the same thing, and it was wildly more successful in certain ways. So, yep. So who are we? We are Tigrayans in Web3. We are probably some of the only ones. And we're actively working to make sure that that's not, we're not the last. Why are we here? Well, our mission is to ensure Tigray is never hidden from the world again. And what does that really look like? What does it mean when we're trying to make sure the world's not hiding us? Well, in November of just this last year, and let's like realize that the Tigray war is from 2020 through the start of 2023. So in November, just a few months ago, the entire world went to Addis Ababa for the UN Internet Governance Forum. Addis Ababa, the capital city of Ethiopia, and this event is designed to highlight open internet policies in the developing world. It's supposed to make everybody feel good. They're like, hey, we had a few companies donate a few $100 million. We're getting internet to these people. And shouldn't we all feel good about ourselves? Now, keep in mind, now that pat on the back conversation was happening inside the capital city of a country that was completely shutting off internet to 7 million of its citizens just north of that little funny fancy conference that a bunch of European and American and private sector people were at. They knew about it entirely. They knew everything was going on. They knew that there was a starvation of 7 million. The idea for the West is that Ethiopia needs to stay unified. That is the biggest concern for the West and for global powers. It's the concern for many other countries as well. They're like, we need to keep them unified. And I will now explain to you why internet access as a human right is one of the biggest bargaining chips that the West is just leaving on the table when dealing with operating sanctions and creating actual human rights stability in multiple parts of the world. Because this is what it looks like when we're not there. Oh. Bro. Can you turn the sound back up?
Thank you all very much.
This is the IGF conference in Addis Ababa. This is why we're here.
What is the timeline to reconnect Tigray?
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Ethiopia has been hugely pleased to have had you
this is the closing
for 1
ceremony.
week here in Addis Ababa for this important gathering, this important world gathering of the world of the internet and digital technology. Thank you all very much for having me here with us. It is a great
timeline to reconnect Tigray.
Ethiopia's history, we would say.
All right, so
because
this situation that's happening here is the closing ceremonies of that exact conference that was shut down to Tigrayans and was, honestly, even if you all had visited there, they would have taken your phones upon entering the building. This was an incredibly locked down event. We managed to hack into their Zoom accounts and we managed to do what needed to be done to convince them that we were European translators for diplomats. However, it was done with the entire intent of entering these conversations, taking over the mic, and completely just asking the question that no reporter was willing to ask the question that no politician was willing to even approach with the Prime Minister, Crime Minister Abiy Ahmed. So we decided to go ahead and get involved, turned off the fucking mute, and said, what is the timeline to reconnect Tigray? The person who did that remains unnamed, but you know, it's something we probably can't tell everyone their name. So, what does that look like in the future? Well, the weaponization of internet looks like this. We need to pause. What the F is multi-ethnic federalism? Because that's what Ethiopia is. Before we get into this, I don't want to like overwhelm you guys. I can see like there's a glaze that comes over people. They're like, I have to learn more proper nouns about African people. I cannot handle that. Here's the deal. Multi-ethnic federalism is exactly what a lot of Western countries have actually already implemented. Multi-ethnic federalism Other one?
Try a different USB-C. I don't know why it's giving you these issues.
That's just my life. Give me the juice. Hey! All right, let's be honest. This is probably the most technical difficulty anybody's going to have, and it's probably because this content is actually worth listening to. So, what the hell is multi-ethnic federalism? All of you guys have already experienced it. Ethiopia is the original EU. That's like plain and simple. This is a country that has been around a lot longer than most other countries. So what is happening to Tigray is exactly like if France's entire infrastructure was suddenly shut down by the rest of the EU. And not even the rest of the EU, by if like the chairman, director of the EU decided arbitrarily that France has kind of been, they fucked around, they're going to find out. And that is what's happening here. So it's not like, oh, these tribes are at tribal warfare. A lot of people like to just dismiss African situations because it's tribal warfare or they can't identify with it. It's literally the EU, and it's just a way older version of it, okay? So when we say internet as a human right or there are no rights, it's because there are places in the world where infrastructure as a whole is quite centralized. And this is never going to change unless there is actual pressure from outside parties, third parties interested in developing within those nations, making a standard call saying, hey, this centralized internet infrastructure actually isn't going to work because we protect human rights. So what does that actually look like? Well, the real problem of this is, I'm sure, a quote you guys have all seen before. It's been used many times in a lot of different versions of things. But the real problem with humanity is the following. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. It is terrifically dangerous, and it is now approaching a point of crisis overall. Well, the issue here is that Tigray is past the point of crisis. When we have a centralized government that has completely locked us out, it looks like this. Ethiopia's telecommunications, banking system, and power grid, utilities that serve 117 million people, are entirely centralized to the capital city of Addis Ababa. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed can flip off the lights and internet whenever he wants, and he did. On November 4th, 2020, he flipped the switch and decided that realistically, the Tigray people were not his biggest concern. They were causing political unrest for him. He decided it'd be easier to completely erase 7 million people's digital footprint, completely cut them off from the entire world, and cut off their families' ability to connect with them and talk to them. So for the last 2.5 years, there are millions of people around the world who have not been able to talk to anyone in their family, a single member of their family, and have no idea whether or not they are still alive inside of Tigray. That is the reality of what weaponized internet looks like. So let's go beyond internet. Now we kind of understand, sure, centralized infrastructure is really not the greatest thing for freedom of speech, for human rights to be maintained and, upheld. But there's actually a really interesting new use of crypto that actually lends crypto as a tool of genocide. And what I mean by that, a lot of you are like, wait, what the hell? How can crypto be a tool of genocide? Reality is it actually can, because in 2016, 2017, when all of us were saying shit like bank the unbanked, and we should do that, we should really help out all these people around the world, what actually happens, and I have confirmation of this from multiple layer 1 communities, I will not be naming things, obviously, was that everybody wanted users. We all wanted users. And what do? We want to have a lot of clout. We want to get clout because of the user base that we've managed to acquire. So what's everybody doing? Everybody's trying to get contracts from the UN, from the World Food Program. They're trying to have them build little programs on their blockchain. So what happens when they want to do that? Well, they control how it's built, because we want their money and their clout and their reach, and we want to prove to all the other crypto projects that we're going to be the one that makes it, that this one's going to do it. Well, this is what's been built on multiple layer 1s with multiple NGOs, and it's basically a bio-tracking that's also used to create stipend payouts so that refugees can buy things. Well, this sounds good, and we're all like, yeah, wow, look at that. Crypto, helping people, it's doing the dance. This is what we got here for. Definitely not. That is super not what's happening here. The architecture of this stipend distribution is dependent on decentralized payment rails, sure, being paired with a centralized database of identity database. That is the reality of it. And they're selling this to everyone, saying this is a privacy-preserving way of distributing money to refugees and migrant populations. They're claiming that this is going to somehow protect people. Well, you guys might also be like, sure, maybe they claim that. Maybe that's bad marketing. Maybe they should change their marketing. Sure. No. They have a third-party search engine that allows them to know who all the refugees are and what their blockchain address is. Is that really that bad? It's getting through a genocide. Actually, yeah, it super is. Because who are these NGOs sharing this information with? Sharing data like who you are, your genetic code, your map of where you've been, the village you come from, where your family is staying, where they've tried to escape to. They're sharing it with the Ethiopian effing government. They give it back to the government that these people are migrating from. And so when they share that information with them, they say, hey, you know that those 2 million people you chased out of Western Tigray? they're all over here. These are their names. This is what their health status is. This is their genetic information. And this is the village they come from. Now, you might be saying, that's a lot to expect out of an Ethiopia, out of any government. They're like tracking them. What are they going to really do with that information? This has already happened before. This is not us whistleblowing for the UN. The UN is aware of the fact that this has happened because in Myanmar, they did this same pilot. Before they rolled this out everywhere, they did the pilot in Myanmar. And what happened was they gave this information back to the government, and those people tried to return to their displaced regions, and they were murdered. They were murked. They were killed. Finito. It was done. And that is like the reality of sharing data on even the most basic concepts of like stipend distribution. And the reality is that these companies designed this on purpose. There are multiple, there's like 3 of them, and one of them says that they brag about the ability to spin you up your own search engine so that you can categorize the refugees. If you're involved in the UN efforts or you're associated with the UN, you have access to refugee data. So, they're giving the very genocidal forces these victims are fleeing access to the location of this data and basically a map of everywhere they've been. This puts families at risk. This is the standard design of the protocol. External database, you get it. It's literally the worst design ever. And they're having crypto devs that's dedicated their lives to saying like, hey, let's liberate the world. They're saying, you know what? Shut up and build this thing for the UN. And these devs do. And I can confirm that they do because they've complained about it and talked to me to give me this information. This is unacceptable. And Tigrayans demand data sovereignty. Why do we demand data sovereignty? Why do we demand internet sovereignty? Is because when internet infrastructure is weaponized against us, there's millions of stories, countless crimes, and a ton of atrocities that are easily hidden. And those atrocities overwhelmingly do affect women. They are the ones on the front lines having to deal with the lack of humanity being displayed. So I want to give the mic over to a Tigrayan woman who's actually been on the front lines, worked with the refugees, and helped actually create some kind of support network for violence survivors and sexual violence survivors. We're going to go over, by the way.
All right. Hi, everyone. So I was in Sudan working in the refugee camps, also during the Sudanese internet shutdown as well, ironically. So as JJ mentioned, who pays the price in war? Overwhelmingly, it's women, children, girls, and vulnerable populations. And in Tigray, that's definitely been the case. So current status, there's over 70,000 Tigrayan refugees that have fled from Tigray on foot, fleeing away from genocidal forces, experiencing violence on the way. And once they get to Sudan, once they get to these safe zones, they still face a range of issues. One of those issues is food insecurity. So one example in 2021, the World Food Program was not passing out food, and the refugees in Tigray were pleading with diaspora to help them, to send them resources. Instead, the World Food Program was giving them vouchers. These vouchers are useless because refugees cannot leave their camps. They are essentially in an open-air prison. So that's one issue. Another issue is that within the camps, because of all of these resource scarcity problems, and also because of the lack of infrastructure, clinics being under-resourced, schools being under-resourced, people end up in risk-prone situations because they leave the camps anyway in order to seek work. And some of that work leads them to being trafficked into places like Libya, which is an insane human trafficking crisis. You can talk to me about that after. There's been prostitution on the rise as well. And then on top of that, risky situations, work situations that are illegal within Sudan and neighboring countries because people are desperate. They do not have the resources within the camps, and these institutions like the UN and the UNHCR and all these NGOs are not helping them in the ways that they need. So some examples. So this is an example of a fire that I witnessed while interviewing a family in Sudan. It took out 5 family homes within minutes, and there was no infrastructure, no one to help. We all turned into firefighters within seconds, dropped our camera equipment, and we're just grabbing water from wherever we could find. There was no water, there was no fire truck, nothing. And these people were not compensated. So these UNHCR tents, for example, and also refugees are even lucky if they get these tents. Sometimes they are stolen and resold outside in neighboring Sudan. A lot of these tents are not durable for the weather. There's mudslides, there's fires due to the environment, and there's nothing they can do. So as you can see, their homes are constructed with destruction in mind. And mind you, these are all the things that these people have brought on their backs. They have nothing left in Tigray, and all of it's gone in an instant in a freak fire like this. So a little bit about the population that I was working with in Sudan. A lot of them were survivors of gender-based sexual violence or conflict sexual violence. This is a quote from a doctor in the last week from Mekelle, which is the capital in Tigray. He says that 120,000 women and girls have been projected to one of the worst forms of sexual violence the world has ever witnessed. So things like gang rape, being raped in front of your family, tied up against trees, and girls as younger than 10 years old, all the way up to elderly women experience this. And there's so much social stigma, a lot of these victims do not come forward. And so a lot of our work in Sudan had to do with creating different projects where women could sit in groups, create small businesses, and feel comfortable to share their experiences so we could document them for future legal proceedings. Because what these people have experienced amount to war crimes. And right now, it's 200,000 people are estimated to have been experienced sexual violence. So this is also a quote that I heard over and over again when interviewing survivors. A lot of them wish that they would have died and not survived because of the humiliation and the shame and the stigma. And I also want to highlight men have been victims of sexual violence and rape. They do not come forward, and these things are discovered at the hospitals that are often under-resourced in Tigray. So where do you come in? The Web3 community has tons of resources, and we need your funds. So there are reachable communities in Sudan that we can connect you to, and I can talk to you more offline about. Tigray is still under siege despite the peace deal. There's still not internet. I have not heard from my family. My grandmother died at the very beginning of the war, and this is the reality for most of us. So there are so many different ways that the Web3 community can utilize their resources, their infrastructure to provide internet in these camps, work opportunities, microfinance or microgrants so that people can create these businesses and survive these traumas and have sustainable growth. And next we have Michael with the Tigray Art Collective.
Thank you. So, Art on the Front Lines. We started the Tigray Art Collective to join the Web3 space, to provide, our purpose is to utilize artist artwork from the Tigrayan community and to use our network to raise awareness of the conflict. Our goal is to be able to tell our stories of our culture, our history, and our struggle. Entering the Web3 space has allowed us to leverage tools such as NFTs, grant programs, pool donations, and much more. So all in all, throughout entering the Web3 space, we've definitely seen a handful of gatekeeping. When we look at the conflict in Ukraine, there was a lot of substantial support. A lot of people would say it's because there's a handful of Ukrainians in the Web3 space. And, you know, as crypto in general is supposed to be for the people, it's supposed to be emphasized to help everyone out. But when this conflict is happening and Africans are asking for help, there's a lot of crickets. So as we go along in this conflict, we have seen artifacts and historical sites being destroyed. Hundreds of artifacts end up on eBay that are stolen from churches and looted directly from Tigray. And you know, now that we're here, what we're trying to do is raise awareness, point out to what is happening and how we can provide resources and tools within the Web3 space to elevate and promote our cause.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael. Sorry, we gotta wrap this up a little bit. Technical difficulties lead to us losing time. It happens. So, let's do this real quick. Facebook can catch these hands. So, killing the academics, that was a huge plan of the genocide. Facebook, which is used by more than 6 million Ethiopians, has been a key avenue with which narratives have targeted Tigrayans. Specifically, like leaked documents by Francis Haugen directly called out that Meta leadership was well informed about the platform's potential for this violence to be exacerbated. They knew it happened. It wasn't difficult to identify. They verified these government agency pages were doing this, and they still didn't care. These were universities hunting their own students. This is a man, Professor Amare Abraha. It was a professor that was outspoken in the Amhara region about the Tigray genocide, and he was hunted down and murdered outside of his home. His son is now suing Meta and Facebook for $1.6 billion with a ton of Tigrayans behind him whose family was also hunted down and murdered because of Facebook posts that were confirmed. And Zuckerberg, all of them confirmed and have internal documents that prove that they knew that these hunts were happening and they didn't do anything about it because it was making them money. So, if you have a platform that's a genocide platform, why are you getting a platform at all? So, the whole Kill the Academics was maintained and is still being maintained by Facebook. So, in response, we propose this movement, Woyane Internet. It is the idea that we should have infrastructure sovereignty over our internet. That's just it. This should be something that all oppressed populations around the planet identify with. Everyone who is in a situation where they have leapfrogged forward, you haven't leapfrogged as a nation. Your country is actually not. Your country has leapfrogged a couple cities, and then you are a completely different class of individual within your country. A centralized infrastructure, by demand, makes you a second-class citizen. So every element of war was used. This is why we think we should actually look at every element of battle that we have at our ability. Tigray needs to take its struggle to the digital realm. Tigray needs internet sovereignty. And the reason is because the Cessation of Hostilities Treaty stopped the war, not the genocide. There is still a genocide going on. There is still no internet. There is still huge portions of this region that do not have access to internet or any health services because they were completely destroyed by the government that built those health services in the first place. So let's not forget that. So never again actually means Tigray must always be online. And that's what we're here to do. Woyane Internet creates space for a free Tigray. So feel free to come and talk to us about this. I'm getting the wave because I've gone over my time by kind of a lot, but why not? So thank you. And Yekinyele, feel free to scan this QR code. Come to the party that we're throwing on Saturday. If any of you have ever been to any of my other parties, it's not a bad time. Then go to this link and just figure out your own shit, There's a lot of different ways in which you can get involved, but I would suggest coming and talking to us directly in order to find the most impactful ways with which you can work with actual Tigrayans, not the UN, not the World Food Program, not anyone who's saying they're doing things. Actual Tigrayans who are on the ground using crypto and using tools to help rehabilitate survivors and protect our people. Thank you.